And I think you can be concerned that there's not enough mobility or enough opportunity, but you don't have to also believe that things are getting worse.
Hi, I'm Nick Gillespie with ReasonTV, and today we're talking with Scott Winship. He is a PhD fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. Scott, thanks for talking to us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you do a lot of work on kind of related concepts of income inequality and income mobility. Everybody seems to be interested in any income inequality, the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest. People also talk a lot about income mobility, the ability of a person to move from kind of one end of income spectrum to the other. And everybody, whatever their ideology is, seems to agree income inequality has spread more and that income mobility is over. You have people like Charles Murray in Coming Apart saying it's over. Timothy Noah in his recent book about income mobility saying it's over. You take issue with that statement. Talk a little bit about what your work on income mobility has found.
People kind of talk, researchers, journalists talk offhandedly about the American dream declining, that mobility has declined. The research is much more ambiguous than that. It's not clear at all that mobility has declined. And in part, I think people are wedded to this idea that it has declined because there is a consensus, as you say, that inequality has increased. And so people talk about the rungs of the income ladder growing further apart. And it's
so they're basically saying, okay, because the richest 1% or the richest 10% is much richer than the lowest 10%, then mobility between these sections has to be harder.
That's right. Where inequality is really taking off is at the very top of the ladder. And so if you're using this ladder metaphor, what's happened is the top rung has flown away from everybody else. But there's no reason that makes it any more difficult to climb, the bottom 2/3 of the ladder, for instance.
So from your research, basically, what you're finding is that it's not that everybody has an equal shot at becoming a bazillionaire or anything, but that the rates of mobility in 1970 are roughly the same as they are now.
That's right. And I think you can be concerned that there's not enough mobility or enough opportunity, but you don't have to also believe that things are getting worse.
Right. And yet, when you've gone into print in a variety of places, you've talked about this at everywhere from National Review to The Atlantic to your own work at Brookings and whatnot, you routinely get attacked for, why are people so mad if you're actually bringing some good news?
I think there's an analogy on the right where if you're a cultural conservative, for instance, that the gay uncle in your family, in some sense, is this existential threat to your worldview, and it becomes. I think you have a similar situation on the left, where if you start to acknowledge that some things actually are not getting worse or are getting better, it starts to chip away at the whole bundle of commitments.
Is there an easy way to say, let's say you were born right at the poverty line? What are your odds of becoming fully middle class or upper middle class or rich?
So if you're born in the bottom fifth, you have about a 40% chance that you're actually going to stay there when you're an adult as well. Now people look at that and think, oh, that's great. 60% make it out, and other people look at it and say, well, this is a travesty. The way that I tend to put it in context is if you start in the bottom, what are the chances that you end up in the top 2/5? So kind of the solid middle class, upper middle class. It turns out you have about a 17% chance of doing that.
But how do we jack up the 17% chance that a low-income person has to get up to the top 40% of income?
There is a small revolution, I think, that's starting to happen with randomized controlled trials and really trying to figure out what works and to try to pursue those policies and to abandon ones that don't. Including some relatively popular ones, things like Head Start, that actually don't look like they have much longer term impact.
And that's an early intervention preschool program and early elementary school program for
that's
poor
right.
kids.
The primary way that the federal government invests in poor kids before school.
How did you get interested in questions of income mobility?
Since being in college, I've been in urban places and have noticed the inequality and have spent a lot of time really thinking about the disadvantages of growing up in concentrated poverty in poor neighborhoods, and that's really what originally got me interested in it as well. And then as I found out over time, a lot of the economic trends that I think liberals tend to overstate how bad things are getting to the extent that some of those actually don't look all that bad at all, I think what is left of the problems that are kind of worth worrying about, to me, limited opportunity for people who start in the bottom kind of rises to the top by default, I guess.
Well, Scott Winship of the Brookings Institution, thank you so much for talking to ReasonTV today about income mobility. I'm Nick Gillespie for ReasonTV.